Hello, friends, and welcome back to the InterWorld Podcast, where we explore the intersection of personal and collective transformation. I'm Yasha, and I work as a PhD researcher in the field of holistic psychology, as well as a founder of the InterWorld Institute for Inner World Peace. Today we have a very special and unusual episode. I often mention that you can learn more about our nonprofit by going to interworld.org. But in this case today, you can also learn more about our nonprofit just by listening to the whole episode, because we have an unusual special feature, which is going to include two guests. And these two guests are two of my best friends, and they're also the two other main board members of the InterWorld Institute. Paige Stevens is my partner in life and also in the Institute, and is a member of our leadership team. And Alec Arshovsky has been literally a lifelong friend and a co-founding member of the whole vision and organization since the beginning. So together, the three of us work with many people to make this whole operation happen. It's much bigger than one podcast, and it's also bigger than something that any one person could handle on their own without collaboration and help. And so I'm so grateful to both of these humans for being in my life, and I'm excited to share this unusual episode where we kind of peel back the curtain and have a look at InterWorld itself, the organization behind the podcast and the team behind the organization. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Paige and Alec. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, Yasha.
Hey.
So welcome to the front of the stage rather than behind the scenes of the InterWorld Podcast. There's a lot that we're going to get into today, but I just want to start by introducing y'all to the audience. We haven't even mentioned your own background or involvement at all. So maybe we'll start with Alec. I'm curious if you want to share a little bit about your origin and life journey, any brief highlights that feel relevant to your work in the world, with InterWorld and otherwise, and we can kind of flow from there.
Well, as you mentioned, Yasha, we have been lifelong friends. We met when we were 2 on a playground. And when we were kids, we were already talking about this mission and vision of InterWorld Institute and the mission of peace. And a little later in my childhood, I took a strong interest in engineering and science and math. And so my path led me to study engineering at Stanford University. And as I was there, we started really connecting more about the next phases of the vision. And as I was graduating, I was realizing that this is what felt most important to me and to my soul to be working on in the world, is to basically contribute to this vision of a new paradigm of creating inner peace as a means to transforming the world around us in our communities and in wider circles as we educate and do our work as the Institute.
Yeah, beautiful. Right, we'll linger here with you, Alec. Alec is always, in my opinion, pretty humble and introspective, and so I always like to point out some of the epically unusual fun facts about Alec's life story. We grew up together playing games and being super cosmic as little kids and super soul oriented, stargazing, and starting the Institute back then. We started as a World Changers organization, and we had this same mission of inner world peace. back then. And so even the symbol and the name and everything persisted into adulthood. And Alec has been a key player in the whole journey from like our earliest childhood memories when we were mapping this all out and plotting it together, and then later into our teen years and our adult years, reconnecting after Alec finished Stanford. But in between, one of the fun facts is that Alec, when you were in high school, you created an algorithm that automates a medical procedure. So it'd be fun to hear some of the details about that particular project, just simply what it does, how that works, and the competition that it was involved with in the States.
Yeah, so the algorithm that I created automated a process for a kind of transplantation surgery for the eye, for the cornea, which is the front of the eye. So in cases with some very serious diseases, a surgeon needs to remove part of the cornea and replace it with a healthy piece of tissue. But the surgeon doesn't want to cause farsightedness in the patient. And so they want to know the exact three-dimensional structure of the piece of transplant tissue to make sure that the patient after the procedure has good eyesight. And so I wrote a program to automatically characterize or quantify this three-dimensional shape of the transplant tissue. And so with that work, I also entered into some science competitions, including what was known as the Intel Science Talent Search. And I also actually represented the United States at a science competition in China, where I also got a gold medal. And was a finalist in the Science Talent Search as well.
Wow, the China one is revealing some new terrain we can explore here for a minute. But just to highlight your work creating this algorithm that automates part of the corneal transplant procedure in high school won you this position as a finalist in that science search in the States. And then as the winner, I know that you traveled to Washington and met President Obama and all these things with some other finalists. And one of the things I find most archetypally fascinating and exciting is that there was a minor planet named in your honor. It's like this flying planetary meteor in space, and you can actually find Arshovsky's name on a Wikipedia page describing the name of this minor planet. I think I've looked into it before. So if you want to share anything about that and confirm if that's true or if I'm crazy, and any other details to add about the China program, because I haven't heard as much about that one, maybe, what won you the gold medal and what that experience was like.
Yeah, that is the case. And in the science talent search, basically, I was one of 40 finalists. And so we had about a week-long program in DC and presented our work, had the last rounds of the competition. I met President Obama at the White House and exchanged a few very brief words. It was a fun experience to meet people from all over the country who were working on pretty cool science projects. And then the China competition was actually, I think that's the only time, that's the only time I've been to China, but it was really cool to go as part of this delegation from the United States and see a little bit more of how, students are living there and visit some of the sites in Beijing and see the Great Wall and some other things. And experience just the taste of being in that country, and meet different international delegations as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it may be worth noting also that I actually recently visited the playground where we met in Newton, Massachusetts, when we were two, and we, shared childhood friends and camping trips and all kinds of things, and grew up speaking Russian together because your family comes from Russia, mine from Ukraine, and so that was a part of the friendship from the get-go. And I just want to, highlight that in addition to winning gold medals, Alec is also, one of the reasons you're my homie, or one of the few people that actually has fun playing the game set with me. So there's a lot of fun times there. And on the team, in terms of InterWorld, for our listeners, Alec is in many ways one of the main implementers as far as the visionary dynamic goes, taking the shared vision into practice in a hands-on way to help make all kinds of things happen based on what's needed in the moment in order to actually manifest those big ideas and intentions. And a lot of that, in many important ways, interdepends upon Alec's contributions and participation. And in addition to being like an overall visionary implementer with me, Alec is also like our lead programmer, our tech guy, our engineer and construction guy. So both software and physically implementing. And then also, from our childhood, Alec and I both always had this like interest in kind of the crazy inventor mode of things and innovating new ways of doing things. And that really translates well into our adult work together, because developing the eco village here, for instance, Alec is designing and executing together with our other member Haven. Alec is designing and executing right now the geothermal climate system for our submerged Wallopeenia inspired greenhouse to grow food on the property. And similarly, we are going to be working together on building out the eco-grid designs and like green building innovations that we've created here for the land. So there's a lot that goes into all of that, and it's absolutely priceless to have a collaborator with such technical skill and adaptability and enthusiasm. So I'm really happy that we get to work together, and that we get to do this podcast. And so I just want to, with the time we have, transition over to introducing Paige. Paige also lives at the Eco Village with us here. We happen to all be on campus right now in person, and we just record with a program that works better on the computer, so we're not sitting in the same room, but we're all at home right now. And Paige is also the newest member of our board of directors, and the only other core leadership team member that's this active. We have a team beyond the three of us, but Paige is one of the leaders right now and is really contributing a lot. And so I just want to invite you to share with the audience a little bit about your background, some highlights from your life story, and kind of the skill set that you envision to continue bringing into the team.
Awesome, thanks. You're right about Alec is so humble. Like he went to China. I was like, what? Is this a star named after him? Like, what? I'm always finding new stuff about Alec. He's just really spectacular. Yeah, so where should I begin? I mean, as for my work, I'm a business coach. I've always been really interested in personal development and have kind of mostly tended to approach that. Like I went to school for counseling. I went to grad school for counseling, and have kind of like been really interested in how do I take somebody through a conversation where there's some kind of outcome that they want in their life, and I just help them achieve it. So that's been really facilitating my work as a business coach. And then also on like from the business side, how do we create systems and structures to keep track of things, to measure things, to make sure that needles are moving. And so yeah, that's what I do for my livelihood. And then yeah, I'm really drawn to the interworld mission. I think both Yasha and Alec are spectacular human beings who are here to do a really amazing, like, world changing thing. And so when I first started hanging around and started asking questions about things and realized there's a really natural role for me to play here, just in like looking at things and tracking them and systematizing and creating checklists and making sure that things are happening, that results are happening, and that we're doing things such that those results are happening. And not that you guys don't already know how to do that, but keeping track of that is really something that comes really easily to me. Yeah, I guess I'll stop there.
Yeah, well, we're very lucky to have a successful professional business coach as a leadership team member, because it's clearly going to help expand the business aspect of what we're doing. Because even as a nonprofit, you know, some people don't realize that nonprofits depend on their existence. It's depend for their existence on still having a functional model, whether it involves fundraising and donations as a primary source or some sort of fee for service. And this may be useful information for people out there who are interested in social innovation and philanthropy and entrepreneurship, that the 501c3 model is one of the many options, and we are very happy to have followed it. But even if you create a nonprofit, that doesn't mean that it's going to magically just sustain itself right away. You could say that the way ours sustains itself might be labeled magical. But that being said, there's still a ton of effort that goes into that. And Paige is helping bring us into that next phase of squaring, and beveling, chopping and beveling and squaring the circle and putting it all together to bring us into the next stage of making the nonprofit sustainable. Because when you have a public charity, unless there's a financial model that works to support it, some sort of service or offering you're contributing, ideally at an affordable rate, coupled with fundraising and so on. But unless there's some model that works, it can A, fall apart, and B, the people working on it wouldn't get any payment either. And so even when you follow a nonprofit model, you need to have ideally some business acumen in order to understand even just the basic goal of eventually being able to pay team members some amount of salary. And so that's one of the things we're working towards now with Paige's help. And Paige is an expert in that field. And so that's exciting. And Paige also has great people skills and is working on helping us coordinate with our team and keep track of our projects and move our mission forward. And luckily, when Paige and I met one fateful day, Paige had already shared before then in her own life a number of similar intentions with her own coaching and personal development career and trajectory that involved eventually having a retreat center and creating an academy and so on. And these are the main projects of the nonprofit. So we were able to merge those pretty seamlessly. And so, yeah, I want to invite you to share a little bit more about yourself for a few minutes, because I find your background and life and story to be so fascinating. You are humble, like Alec. I'm probably the least humble of the three. Maybe that's why I'm never behind the curtain. But yeah, I think that it's, you speak 3 languages: Korean, Spanish, English, and now you're starting to excel at Russian. So I'm intimidated because I've barely got any Korean. And that comes from your work as a linguist. And I'm curious if you want to share a little bit about that, and then how you transitioned from that, different aspects of that work, which you could share with us, into more before coaching, work with teaching and education, as well as with yoga and the yoga training that you've experienced. Maybe you could share a little bit about those topics with us.
Yeah, that's like 7 topics, but I'll try to give a Reader's Digest version of that. Yeah, I was really fascinated by language, and for a long time I thought that was going to be what my life was really about, was just languages. And I went to Chile as a foreign exchange student in high school and had a blast learning Spanish and living in a foreign country, and came back halfway through my senior year with no plan of what I was going to do after high school. And I was like, well, I just would love to study more languages. Can I just, what, do I go into debt and go to college learning a language that I don't even really know what I want to do with it, how it's going to make any money? And my Spanish teacher, she was like, you know, the military teaches languages. And yeah, I was kind of like a little bit of a pacifist at the time. And then all of a sudden presented with this really kind of cool economic opportunity where not only would I not have to go into debt, I would get a paycheck for learning the thing that I wanted to learn, and also have 5 years to buy myself some time to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. Yeah, and so I showed up to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, and they're like, you're going to learn Korean. And I was like, cool, I don't know where that is on a map. You know, I was 18 years old and I had to look at the map to know where that was. And then was stationed in Korea for 3 years. Really amazing experience. And then, yeah, I was getting out of the military and I was like, what do I want to do next? And I never deployed when I was in service. And so I got this opportunity to go to Afghanistan as a DoD contractor. I did that for 18 months. And I imagine you're probably going to ask me because you love this story, so I'll just tell it now. But I had this kind of like this, you know, as an 18-year-old joining the military, having this like, I don't know, is this like ethically in alignment for me? But there's so many economic benefits coming back to, you know, what was it, 8-9 years later, in Afghanistan. And we would go to work and they would say, okay, this target's been taken out. There's a new primary target. And I had this moment where I was like, that's a person. And euphemistically, what we're saying is this person is now dead. And that person probably had a family and people who loved them. And I don't know if this work is in alignment for me. I don't know if I want to keep doing this. And my very next thought was, but I'm making so much money. 6 figures, tax-free, with almost no expenses. All of my room and board was paid for. And really, really wrestled with this kind of recognition of, you know, how long and how far I was in Afghanistan for 1.5 years, and like how long and how far I was able to go without kind of reconciling myself with my own like ethical dilemmas. And that was kind of a turning point for me to really, you know and understand that moving forward, whatever I did with my life needed to be life-giving necessarily. And so I left Afghanistan and kind of floundered for a while, and then decided to become a teacher. And I was teaching in Texas. I taught geography, which was perfect for me because I had always really loved to travel and really love languages. And in that environment, really learned a lot about kind of how we're educating our children and how the system of education has so many just like conditioned and socialized questionable components, that I really started questioning, had this moment of awareness of like, oh, this school district is just trying to get the most kids into college for the least amount of money. And then I'm on this campus that's only 9th and 10th grade, and there's 2,500 students, and they don't know each other, and the teachers don't know their names. And then, yeah, just kind of questioning, like, seeing these, young humans showing up to school with debilitating depression and anxiety. And kind of my job is to make sure that they get good grades, but looking at them with the level of stress, like, how can you perform when your mental health isn't very well? And why is anything more important than these kids feeling good? Like, why are we prioritizing these like numeric outcomes? And also like the kids feeling pressure to kind of show up and do what they're told and then come to the other side of high school the way I did, and was like, well, what do I do when there's no more rubric, when nobody's telling me what to do anymore? And kind of feeling a little outraged for myself of, I don't know how to make these decisions because nobody ever told me that these things are worth grappling with and figuring out on our own. And it's kind of like autopilot to just show up and do what you're told. And so I left education because I was looking around at what I was asked to do, and I was like, this isn't life-giving. Now what? And so I enrolled in grad school from counseling. And around the same time, somebody was like, you might not have to wait 3 years for this graduate degree to do the work you want to do. You could just try coaching. And so I started coaching I think it was within a couple months of starting grad school, and was studying both coaching and counseling simultaneously. And I think I've really kind of developed my own style and wrestled with, like, is it ethical to coach, or should we have the amount of training that counselors get? And then along the way, I did some yoga teacher trainings, went to India for a month, got certified in hypnotherapy, all kinds of other little side stories that we could go into.
Yeah, I was hoping that maybe you can just briefly touch on the yoga, and especially the difference between the two different yoga teacher trainings that you encountered, because I know that you ended up taking two, and that they were quite different from each other. So if you want to just sum up for us what happened there and what those were like in comparison, since that's one of the topics we often study on the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I had an interest in yoga from a young age. I took my first yoga class when I was 16. And I was a teacher, and I found out about this yoga teacher training that was for educators. And I was really hopeful about bringing some of the yoga, principles into the classroom. And the yoga teacher training I did was a very vinyasa style, kind of westernized interpretation of what yoga is. And it was really beautiful. It was a really well done training. And then there was something about, like, I need to understand this from its roots. Like, I kept getting this sense of, like, when I hear other teachers, like more traditional teachers that are from India, talk about India, they're talking about yoga, they're talking about it in very different terms. And so I chose a yoga teacher training in India, and it was a hatha teaching, which vinyasa and hatha they're pretty different from each other. And I think that vinyasa is really palatable and interesting for a lot of Westerners because it's active. It feels like a workout. It is maybe almost even sometimes a little bit like a dance. And I think that there's something there's a lot of movement that can happen in that. And that is very satisfying to, a culture where productivity and action is really valued. But my yoga teacher training in India, it was hatha style, so it was also different in style. But the teachers talked about one of the the Vedic philosophers that we studied in the training said that stillness is the highest manifestation of power. And that stood out to me so much because I could relate to the feeling of sitting in a yoga training where we're holding postures for 3 to 5 minutes. and I'm feeling my own irritation, in my own muscle fatigue, and my own kind of frustration with myself at not being able to like perform as well as I wanted to, or hold postures as long as I thought I should be able to, and to like huff and gruff and to get up and walk away and like deal with that anxiety is so much easier than to take a deep breath and hold still. And so the hatha training was really about how do we, one, like fortify our muscles so that we can hold a meditative posture for longer, but also how do we confront the various discomforts and, adapt to not having to run away from it. And so the yoga trainers in India talked about how like in the West, it's like sometimes the way that yoga is presented can be facilitating more distraction than how they felt like yoga could be facilitating actually coming into relationship with what is and not have to move away from it.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, and on the flip side, with aspects of Western esotericism, when you and I met, you were suddenly diving into this deep period of experiencing some curiosity and synchronicity around symbolism and wanting to understand alchemy and tarot and dreams and dream images in the Jungian or archetypal sense, but also just generally feeling this like hermetic period in both the traditional sense of the word and literally, spending time with yourself in the big transitions that you were going through in life in order to like understand what those magical and esoteric systems were all about and how they related to your own inner process and reality and so on. So I think that's another very interesting topic that we could go into if we had the time, and maybe next time we will. But I wanted to mention that as another point that we connected over a lot. And that, of course, we're diving into deeper now together with you being here in the Institute where we often study those things. And ultimately, it all connects holistically, east, west, north, south, the different topics of study, psychology, coaching. It's all interconnected. And in terms of the holistic science of transformation that the InterWorld Institute is dedicated to. And that affects both our inner world and the world around us, as Alec mentioned. So I want to transition back to speaking with Alec and speaking about the Institute, although I also guess I could mention that Alec is like Paige, a yogi and blossoming yoga instructor and so on. But today we're going to get more into the organization itself and our nonprofit projects. And it's funny, Paige, you went on a full circle journey from being in intelligence and military to now being here at what we call the Inner Space Force, because we're out in Ellicott, Colorado, near the Space Force base. But we're providing an alternative approach. So while some people try to get to the physical, planetary systems out there with giant rocket ships and military intelligence technologies and whatnot, we're here with internal technologies and a little bit of a shortcut to the outer reaches and other dimensions of the cosmos by going inwards first. So maybe they'll catch up with us eventually and come knocking on our door for the expedited technological capacities we're developing in their backyard. So thanks for joining this team, and we're all learning from each other. So that being said, I wanted to invite Alec. Maybe you could share a little bit of your understanding and we can kind of banter, but let's really dive into the work of this institute that we're all co-creating. And just to introduce, our audience, I want to mention, like I said, this podcast is just one of our many big projects as an organization. And it's also a prelude to the hybrid and online educational content that we'll be delivering in the near future as our main focus through our academy. That is a holistic academy with many topics related to personal growth as well as what's necessary for creating and sustaining human culture and civilization. And so, this podcast is just one of the projects. The Eco Village on the land here is another one where we live. And we've also, organized Heartfire festivals together, retreats, conferences, tours and trainings. It's a huge operation. And it's not something, as I said, that any one person can do. Over the course of many years, more than 2 decades of work, we've had all kinds of different people involved. And in the course of one whole decade as a recognized nonprofit, there's also been many different phases and many different groups of people. And still today we have teachers and advisors and other board members, other team members, and a whole core team we're growing, a network of affiliates, residents at the Eco Village, partners of all sorts. And so we're really grateful to everyone who helps make it possible. And even just the 3 of us is a small sample of the team that contributes to our work. But this is really the active leadership team right now. And I'll highlight a little later why I keep emphasizing the teamwork aspect of our project, because just in the last year alone in 2025 was one of our most exciting leaps. We got a lot done, and so I'll share a little bit about that in a minute. But just to illustrate, how many hands and limbs it takes to have the kind of year that we just had, I want to invite you, Alec, to share a little bit about the story and the mission of the nonprofit in your own words, your own understanding of what we're here to do as an organization, and how we're going about doing it. And we'll just kind of go from there all together.
So, as you've just been mentioning, it's a very big project. It's not that we're doing any one thing, it's that we're really finding a new approach holistically. So that's why, for example, we have an eco village with the residential community and different spiritual practices that we do together. We're really incorporating this as a way even to make a blueprint for how are we wanting to live in a more healthy way with ourselves, each other, with nature. So we, in some way, have boiled down what we're doing into holistic wellness education. We have an emphasis on education, partially because we feel that that's maybe one of the most effective ways to spread understanding and spread what we're doing, kind of like the teaching a man to fish aphorism. And so we have had traditionally 8 limbs in our organization, and so that includes things like creativity and sustainability, with examples being the Heartfire Festival and the Eco Village. And the vision ultimately also is to create a global network of centers that are educational campuses on the land, with residents living there, and contributing towards a new paradigm that we want to shift into, that's living in harmony and that is ultimately sustainable rather than destructive for the earth and for humanity.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Alec. I want to chime in and, just, I guess, define our core purpose as an organization being this term that I've used a couple times today that we call inner world peace. And what we mean by this as our overarching vision at the heart of our organization is that ultimately, through the work of many organizations and many people, we see that humanity is at a crossroads. And I think that that used to be a more radical idea. And now, for anyone paying attention, it's much more obvious and becoming gradually less and less debatable. It's becoming more and more obvious that we as a species are faced with choices, existential crises, polycrises as they call them. And we have always grown and survived and evolved through these periods of transition and leaps and changes. And we're at a turning point, we're at a crossroads. And in order to move forward as a species, it's essential that we not only grow in our external technologies and power and capacities, but that we also mature as a species in terms of our wisdom, in terms of our kindness, in terms of our inner growth as people. And we know this because we've seen through many, many different examples of different systems throughout history, different civilizations that rise and fall, that one system or another, whether you call it communist or capitalist or whatever else you want to call it, will ultimately express symptomatically the same underlying human qualities of the members of that civilization have developed, and the leaders and the participants of that world have developed in themselves. So if they're functioning from a place of separation and greed and win, lose, dog eat dog competition, then ultimately in the end everybody goes down, because that's what gets expressed through whatever system is there. That greed becomes what runs the show. And so the only way to actually make a change is not through some new system or philosophy, but through the change and growth of ourselves as a people, that we become, less selfish and more, intelligent and serving both the best interest of ourselves and others holistically and symbiotically, which is, that synergistic way forward is what we believe as an organization is the most promising and the best way forward. And when that change in the world begins from within the consciousness of individual people, then there is a real possibility, and perhaps the only possibility, and as slim a chance as it might seem, that transformation from the inside out for the human species may be the only real effective, sustainable change that we have, that gives us a chance for moving forward. And so we're in service to that wild idea that we have a chance, and that's what our chance is. And so we're working on supporting that global paradigm shift happening from within. And on one hand, that means that before we try to fix the world out there and say there's something wrong, we look within ourselves and change ourselves. But that to actually grow and change, we don't seclude ourselves in some cave like the old monks of the past. We need to, in order to really transform and grow, engage with others, relating and serving the world around us. And so that is the manner in which that personal growth happens. And so it's very much an interconnected process. And those are basically like our two pillars that our work is based in, is the inner work for global change and the global work for inner change. So that was the best I could do, is a little bit wordy, but hopefully people get it. That sums up our vision for the planet and for the species, to reconnect at the root, to come back from the root cause of the issues we're seeing in the world to a state of reconnection and harmony instead of division and ignorance. And so that's our vision and for the world. And we are serving that with the specific effort, many projects, as we said, that are all interconnected, but the specific effort to ultimately build a global hybrid holistic academy with a network of land-based and spiritually informed community centers that are like the in-person campus for many of the events and gatherings of that academy, and then a whole swath of online educational content for those who can't always be in person as well. And we've started with the Eco Village here in Colorado. So I want to pause here and invite either one of you. Maybe we can just speak a little bit more open-endedly now. And we haven't heard from Paige in a little while, but open-endedly, what specific like projects or initiatives do you feel are the most exciting that we're working on, and how would you describe them in some more detail?
I'm really excited about the academy. Yeah, I mean, having a holistic hybrid academy with content that is all centered around this mission, everything that you just laid out. Like, how do we, I guess, just like become more intentional with how we use land and where we choose to live, and what kind of information we choose to digest. And I think just creating one place where all of those questions can be answered, and resources for kind of creating more of that, facilitating more of that. And I think the academy is really exciting too, because it's not just like Mind Valley where you sign up, and not that there's anything wrong with Mind Valley, where you sign up and you pay for a course, but really kind of wanting people to be interconnected, have an opportunity for them to come and be in person, and also for people who are living here to be a part of that. And then, yeah, I get excited about education in general since I have a background in that.
Yeah, great. Alec, do you want to share any highlights of our project now or coming up or over the years?
I will mention, like Paige, I'm definitely excited about the Academy and have been for a while, and through all of our phases of getting to where we are now with it. I've actually also been a tutor and tutored for thousands of hours myself, and have a family background in education and academia. And I personally just find so much value and transformation in the studies that I've encountered. And I want to also mention that the Eco Village is a big project that we're working on right now. And so, Yasha, you were mentioning earlier that we've been working on these submerged greenhouses. And we've really been building a whole campus. We have 3 event spaces already, from a 4,000 square foot pavilion and a 30-foot stage to a 30-foot diameter yurt, and our basement space, which we've been innovating as a wonderful indoor venue that can be almost 2,000 square feet of open space, or convert into up to 10 rooms of basically dorm lodging for something like a retreat over a weekend. And so that's one of the innovations that we worked on this summer, Yasha, was developing the system of how can we have these rooms fold in and out of the walls easily, so that people have a comfortable space to be in, and also have this multi-use capacity. So a lot of what we've been doing with the Eco Village has involved different kinds of green building. And one of the biggest ones is actually using upcycled materials. And this is one that maybe not as many people are familiar with, but it's kind of like recycling. So we'll take materials that have been used elsewhere and are still in good shape, and use them either for the purpose that they were originally meant for in some cases, or in some cases for something completely different. So we were finishing the interior of a room that we were planning to use as studio space. And we actually lined the ceiling, instead of more traditional ceiling materials, with these acoustic sound panels that came from some office like cubicles and things like that. So these are examples of how we take some material that was used for something and we repurpose them in a new design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Thank you. And I know you could keep going. I'll chime in with a few other examples on this eco village theme. As you mentioned, there's the multi-use spaces, which is considered one of the necessary sort of inventive innovations for the future of architecture, engineering, and construction, is spaces that can have different functions and kind of fold up and transform with buttons and levers. And we've been finding very simple, elegant ways to start doing that. And upcycling is one of those examples where, as Buckminster Fuller said, instead of resisting the old system or option, find the new one that makes the old one obsolete, a better alternative, right? And that's not the same thing as just dropping out or opting out of the existing systems. It literally means find something that's actually better. It's a win-win for everyone. So upcycling, you can find good usable materials, get creative, make things even cooler, and save a lot of money while you're at it. And so that's one of those examples where you're creating less waste, but you might also benefit from it if you do it right. And then, we have solar power. We're talking to one of our main helpers and investors about installing some wind power. We have some big solar innovations with cutting edge technology, with ideas and efforts donated from a world-class green energy scientist that worked with us and lived with us. And so, there's potentially some energy storage capabilities and energy transference capabilities that we'll be working on at the cutting edge of solar power and electricity. And then we've got, different energy efficient elements we're starting to install, and experimenting a lot with conversions of spaces, converting an old used yurt into a giant permanent temple, converting an old unfinished barn, and so on. And then in addition to all of that, the Walapinis, the submerged greenhouses Alec is working on, and quite crucially, soil building and tree planting. So we've put a lot of time and effort in this landscape that's becoming more desertified, to sow some native species, to do hugelkultur and mulching and mycology with working on rebuilding the health of the biome of the soil, vermiculture and worm composting, and there's many other examples of what we've been doing. So we're working on that. We're working with the flow of the water and ultimately planning some big earthworks for these sacred geometry, spaces that'll be the long-term structure of the eco-village and have some passive cooling components. So it goes on and on, but those are a few more examples, and Alec did a great job introducing them and is one of the main characters in that whole operation. I guess I'm curious if either of you want to share anything about the in-person events, because we've touched on the academy, or about the studies, the spiritual disciplines and things like this that we like to share with the public through hosting different guest teachers and elders and things like this. So if either of you want to speak to that aspect, and then we're going to wrap up in just a minute. I'll share the recap of 2025 that I promised, and we'll probably end it there.
You want to go first, Alec?
One of our big in-person events has been the Heartfire Festival, which was one of our very first projects when we really started activating things in 2019. And it's been a really special event, coming from a vision of how can we combine the celebratory aspects of festival culture that our generation really enjoys, but with a groundedness and a spiritual wisdom rather than an escapism. And so our slogan for that has been, when prayer meets celebration, sparks will rise. And so we've had many elders from different wisdom traditions around the world at our Heartfire festivals, indigenous and rabbis and Buddhists and Sufis from all over. And we've also had a lot of amazing musicians and visual artists. We've had Trevor Hall and Modest Yahoo among well-known musicians at our festivals. And personally, I just find them to always be so special. A little bit hard to describe, really, but the way that the container is held, especially with the elders there, is just very special. And it's really fun, too. And Paige, do you want to speak a little bit more about some of our other in-person events?
Yeah, sure. I think the first event that you guys hosted kind of before I became onto the team, the Psyche Soma event was so amazing to have all these people on the land. We had some guest teachers, we did breath work, and just James and Ishkala, Jamishka, with the music and the art and Emerson Jane with the music and dance, body work, just like really comprehensive, beautiful, soul connected experience. And I think that like coming into a more, I'm currently experiencing my own shift of coming more into a spiritual reality, and kind of getting to experience it here firsthand. Whereas before, I think my kind of more grounded in like more practical things. And then, yeah, what you said about festival culture really appealing to our generation really resonated with me, Alec. And I think that what we're offering is something that's more intentional and like a step beyond. Like, how do we have an experience where we're connecting together and also like actually connecting and not really like escaping from each other, escaping into our various diversions. I just think it can be both. It can be both spiritual and also really connected and really fun.
Yeah. Thank you both. Share some last thoughts on this topic of the events. I want to give a shout out to one of our teachers, the Sufi elder Pir Natanel, Miles Yepes, for helping kickstart and co-found the Heartfire Festival project, among many other people. People like Blue Murian and Boulder, Colorado, being one of our most regularly booked acts and collaborators as well now, and many other people. The list goes on. Buddhist nuns and swamis and everyone that makes it happen. Our friends with the Golden Drum community in New York. Lots of very important collaborators that have helped us make our events what they are over the years in important ways. So I wanted to just name that, and name that from the beginning, our intention has always been to meet people where they are, which often is perhaps they've already started questioning and deconstructing the sort of illusions of the conventional mainstream reality with all of its fallacies and absurdities that are going in the wrong direction. But then from there, there's like a void where sometimes there's no tradition, there's no structure, there's no guidance, and it's a party and it's about, entertainment and, transgression and all these things. And that's not really what we're about, because we meet people there, and then we bring in the possibility of a new structure, a new guidance, a new tradition that's different than what they might be used to in the mainstream society. But that's an ancient and universal reality of the human family, having elders and having disciplines and practices that are very valuable and transformative, and overall benefit our well-being and expand our awareness. And so, that's what the events have been about. And they're not always just festivals. We've also had amazing conferences, the Sustainable Living Conference. Paige just mentioned one of our many weekend retreats that we've had, a transformational wellness retreat called Psyche Soma. We've had trainings like sound healer trainings, workshops, tours, and the list goes on. So it's definitely a lot of fun to host events. And just in the last year alone, we had workshops and classes all over the country in multiple different cities and states. We gave talks and lectures at universities and for study groups and different conferences. And so that was very fulfilling and reached a lot of people. We also hosted many guest teachers, including working with a licensed holistic trauma recovery center and therapy group in town here in Colorado Springs, the BBMC. And yeah, we did a lot of travel. We actually traveled the world in the past year. We started forming more connections with other communities in other parts of the world, like Damanhur, Italy, and so on. And we're at the same time hosting regular practices and private retreats here on our land with our core community members that we live with. So it's just been a really, really fruitful year, nonstop events. And on top of all of that, we managed to move the infrastructure forward in huge ways. Tree planting, giant excavation project. We finished the remodeling of the exterior shell of the yurt. And so it's just been a big leap forward. We got a lot of support from people, including the largest formal nonprofit grant we've ever received that was just delivered anonymously and magically, no strings attached. So it's really helping our work, and we're really grateful for whoever contributed in that way this year. Really makes a difference, and we're putting it carefully to the best use for what's needed for our operation. And yeah, those are some of the highlights I wanted to mention. I could go on, but the bottom line is it's such fulfilling work. And not only did Alec and I start in childhood and go through many different stages to get to this point and keep going, but when Alec first came from Stanford to resume the nonprofit work on our organization as adults, we started out with no specific funding in one small basement apartment, no particular income or savings. And we just basically started collecting emails and doing stuff. And now, just several years later, we're right here on 40 acres of land, building out the infrastructure, have hosted many thousands and thousands of people in our gatherings, and it just keeps growing. And I could go through all of the highlights, but the point is, if you want to connect, if you want to stay tuned as a listener, I hope you do, or reach out. We have residencies and events and programs, and it's been quite a journey. So I want to personally leave on a quote that I might butcher and that I don't remember who said it, so I apologize for all of that. But it's on the website of one of our main collaborators or partners, which is the Charis Foundation for New Monasticism and Interspirituality, one of our partnering locations in New Mexico. And one of their teachers said something along the lines of, really emphasizing that we need to fully understand and come to terms with the reality that the definitive revolution is the spiritual awakening of humankind. That's basically the quote, and you can find it on their site if you want to get the right source for it, or maybe Alec knows, but that's where I want to leave it, because that's one of the many great wise people whose quotable teachings illustrate our mission of inner world peace quite well. And so that's where I want to leave it. And I want to say thank you to Paige and Alec for joining me for this special feature today. I hope it was still engaging and interesting for people just to learn a little bit about our own work behind the scenes with our nonprofit. And if either of you want to have the last word, or both of you, please don't hesitate.
Yeah, I guess I could just wrap up with how grateful and excited I am to be a part of what you guys have been creating. It's really special. I'm really just tremendously impressed with the two of you and what you've been able to do so far. There's like funny anecdotes in my head about, from a business perspective, I'm like, yeah, but how much money are we going to make? And you guys are like, well, we've been doing it this way this whole time, and it seems to just work out somehow. So I think it's just like a testament to like the, just like the level of commitment and the belief and the possibility of all of everything that is really, most people would look at this dream and be like, there's no way, like this is totally impractical and unreasonable. And yeah, I feel really inspired by the two of you.
Thank you, Paige, and thank you, Yasha. Yeah, I was thinking about something I've heard from a spiritual elder of mine that talks about how a true vision includes others. And so it really feels like this is such a global collective vision. And it's also always inspiring to see other people working in the same direction, and also seeing people engaging with the InterWorld Institute. And I've just heard many times, Yasha too, people say things about how some of our offerings have been literally life-changing, and that's really special to hear. And it's really great to be able to engage different people in different ways, whether it's a retreat or whether it's a residency, or whether it's a volunteer day. There's so many ways in which to get involved. And I'm really grateful for all of the people that choose to do so.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be possible without all three of us and many others, and you listeners are more than half of the equation. So much love to everyone, and thank you, Paige and Alec. Love you guys, and see you probably in an hour. All right, everybody. Peace.